Welcome to the dairies of science fiction, where extraordinary stories come to life. Enjoy the journey. The atmospheric regulator on Deck 7 had been malfunctioning for 3 days, and apparently, Kai Mercer was the only technician desperate enough, or oblivious enough, to take the job. He stepped off the lift into a corridor bathed in amber emergency lighting, his toolkit magnetically sealed to his hip, wondering if his supervisor had finally decided to kill him through plausible deniability. Station Epsilon hummed around him, that constant thrum of recycled air and spinning gravity rings that every orbital hub dweller learned to ignore. 30,000 souls from 100 worlds, all crammed into a structure that looked like someone had thrown geometric shapes at the void and hoped they'd stick together. Kai had lived here for 6 years, fixing things that broke, which on a station this old meant fixing everything constantly. The job kept him invisible, which suited him fine. He consulted his handheld scanner, following the blinking indicator toward the faulty regulator. His boots clicked against the deck plating, each step echoing in the unusual emptiness. Deck 7 was commercial residential, usually packed with traders and transients. Now it felt like everyone had simultaneously remembered urgent business elsewhere. Kai knew why. Everyone knew why. The Serythian had arrived 4 days ago. He'd heard the whispers in the mess hall, watched spacers make warding gestures he didn't recognize, listened to his coworker Pavel describe the vampire woman in tones usually reserved for reactor breaches. Kai had nodded along, made the appropriate concerned noises, and privately thought that humanity's tendency towards superstition hadn't improved much despite achieving faster-than-light travel. The regulator panel waited at the corridor's end, its diagnostic lights flashing an irritated red sequence. Kai knelt, popping the access cover with practiced ease. Inside, a tangle of bioneural conduits pulsed weakly, their bioluminescent coating dim and irregular. He pulled a calibrator from his kit, muttering to himself. "Right, let's see what's got you all twisted up. Bad data flow, corrupted sensor input, existential crisis about your purpose in the grand machinery of movement," caught his peripheral vision. Through the transparent aluminum viewport to his left, he saw her. She stood in what must have been her assigned quarters, motionless as a statue, facing the observation window that looked out onto the star field beyond. The amber emergency lighting caught her profile, and Kai's hands froze mid-calibration. She was tall, taller than him certainly, wrapped in something that looked like flowing dark fabric but moved wrong, too fluid, almost liquid. Her hair fell in a midnight cascade past her shoulders. Then she turned slightly, and he saw her ears. They swept back from her skull in elegant points, longer than any human's, catching the light like polished wood. Not elven, that was a human fantasy, but something entirely other, something real and alien and present. Kai realized he'd stopped breathing and forced air into his lungs, returning his attention to the regulator with more focus than the task required. His pulse hammered in his ears, which seemed cosmically unfair given that he was the human in this scenario. "Professional," he whispered to the conduits. "We're being professional, just a technician, fixing things. Not staring at the terrifying vampire alien lady. Definitely not doing that." The bioneural interface responded to his calibrations, its glow strengthening. He worked methodically, rerouting the data pathways, his mind determinedly focused on flow rates and pressure balances rather than the presence he could feel through the wall. Serythians were supposed to be empathic, weren't they? Could she sense his nervousness, his curiosity? The calibrator beeped completion. Kai ran a diagnostic, watching the numbers scroll across his scanner's screen, green across the board. He'd done his job. Time to leave, report completion, return to the blessed anonymity of the lower engineering decks, where the most exotic thing he'd encounter was Pavel's questionable lunch choices. He stood, sealing his toolkit, and made the mistake of glancing at the viewport again. She was looking directly at him. Their eyes met through the transparent aluminum, and Kai felt something shift in his chest, not fear exactly, though that was certainly present, but something else. Recognition, maybe. The acknowledgement that passes between two beings who exist in the same moment of space and time. Her eyes were dark, impossibly dark, and as he watched, her pupils contracted and expanded independently, adjusting to read him in the dim light. Then so slowly he almost missed it, she inclined her head. A nod. Acknowledgement returned. Kai's hand rose in an automatic wave, the kind of awkward gesture humans make when caught staring, and he immediately felt like an idiot. He turned toward the lift, his face burning, already composing the report in his head. Behind him, through walls and viewports and the careful distance everyone maintained, Lyss watched the human technician retreat, and something very much like hope stirred in her ancient, tired heart. Kai had convinced himself he wouldn't return to Deck 7. That resolution lasted approximately 11 hours before his supervisor sent him back with orders to check the atmospheric sensors in the same sector. Either the universe had a sense of humor, or his boss was conducting some kind of perverse social experiment. He rode the lift up, gripping his toolkit like a shield, rehearsing casual greetings in his head. Good morning, terrifying alien person seemed inappropriate. Hey, sorry about the staring yesterday, felt worse. Maybe he could just nod professionally and pretend his hands weren't sweating through his work gloves. The corridor looked different in the station's artificial day cycle, less ominous, more merely abandoned. Kai found the sensor array and began his diagnostics, hyper-aware of every sound, every flicker of movement in his peripheral vision. The sensors were fine, naturally, perfectly calibrated. This was absolutely a legitimate work order and not at all his supervisor's idea of entertainment. He was preparing to leave, dignity more or less intact, when he heard footsteps behind him. Kai turned, and there she was, Lyss, standing in the corridor as if she'd simply materialized from the recycled air itself. Up close, she was even more striking, her features sharp and precise, her skin carrying an undertone he couldn't quite name, something between bronze and twilight. The elongated ears swept back against her skull, and he tried very hard not to stare at them again. The environmental systems are functioning properly now, she said, her voice carrying harmonics that made his sternum vibrate. Each word seemed carefully chosen, formal. Your work is appreciated. Kai's brain scrambled for an appropriate response. Just doing my job, keeping the air breathable, pretty important on a space station. Well, important everywhere really, but especially in vacuum. I'm babbling. I'll stop. Something flickered across her face, surprise maybe. Her head tilted slightly, studying him with those unsettling eyes that seemed to process information on multiple levels simultaneously. You are not afraid, she said, and it wasn't quite a question. Oh, I'm definitely afraid, Kai corrected, surprising himself with honesty. I'm just also really bad at showing appropriate survival instincts. It's a character flaw. That sound, was she laughing? It started low, almost subsonic, then rose into something musical and entirely unexpected. Her severe features transformed completely, and Kai found himself grinning back despite his hammering heart. I am Lyss, she said, and the formality in her tone suggested this was more significant than simple introduction. Kai Mercer, Environmental Systems Technician, 3rd Class. Professional air fixer and apparently the station's only employee willing to work this sector. Her expression shifted, something dark crossing it. Yes, others find my presence disturbing. People fear what they don't understand, Kai offered, then winced. That sounded like a greeting card. Sorry. Look, I've fixed regulators in the verdant reaches quarters where the atmosphere would melt human lungs, and last month I worked in the crystalline delegations rooms where the temperature was cold enough to shatter fingers. Everyone's got specific needs. Doesn't make them scary. Lyss moved closer, and Kai's instincts screamed at him to step back. He held his ground, watching her circle him with predatory grace that definitely wasn't helping his heart rate. I require passage to the fringe colonies, she said abruptly. The independent stations near the Traverse. I have approached 17 individuals, all refused. 17, that's impressively thorough rejection. I am Serythian. We are not welcome in most spaces. Her pupils expanded and contracted independently, reading him. I need someone who understands human-operated stations, someone who can navigate bureaucratic systems, someone who might be willing to accept substantial payment for guidance. Kai's brain caught up with the conversation. You're asking me. I am considering it. You've talked to me for approximately 90 seconds, and most of that was me rambling about air quality. Yes, Lyss agreed. Yet you remain. You make jokes. Your fear is present but does not control you. She stopped directly in front of him, close enough that he could see the subtle patterns in her irises, like fractals embedded in darkness. Why is that, Kai Mercer? He thought about it, really thought about it. Honestly, I've spent 6 years being invisible, just another technician in the machinery, and you're looking at me like I'm actually visible, like I matter. That's terrifying in a completely different way than the whole vampire thing. We are not vampires, Lyss said, but her tone carried amusement rather than offense. Though I understand why your species might think so. Yeah, what are you then? She smiled, and it was sharp and genuine and slightly dangerous. Lonely. The word hung in the recycled air between them, and Kai felt something shift in his chest, not fear this time, but recognition. The acknowledgement that loneliness looks the same across species, across the vast emptiness of space. I'll think about it, he heard himself say. The guide thing, I'll actually think about it. Lyss's smile widened fractionally. That is more than 16 others offered. Kai spent the next 3 days falling down a research rabbit hole that made him question his entire understanding of galactic history. The station's database had surprisingly little on Serythians, mostly fragmented entries, contradictory accounts, and what appeared to be badly translated folklore from a dozen different species. Pavel found him in the mess hall at 300 hours, surrounded by datapads, staring at a holographic projection of molecular structures. You look like you're trying to solve the universe, Pavel said, sliding into the opposite seat with a tray of something that allegedly qualified as food. Or like you've forgotten sleep exists. Did you know that Serythian vampirism is actually a symbiotic relationship? Kai gestured at the hollow display, where microscopic organisms swam through rendered blood cells. These little guys, they're called hemophages, terrible name. They live in Serythian blood and process iron compounds that their bodies can't synthesize naturally. Without supplementation, the symbiotes start consuming their host's tissues instead. Pavel stared at him. Are you seriously learning alien biology at 3 in the morning? It's not supernatural. It's just evolutionary biology we didn't understand. Kai swiped through another screen. Their homeworld had low iron content in the ecosystem, so they evolved this partnership. Then someone saw them taking blood supplements and boom, vampire myth spread across half the galaxy. Right, and the hypnotic thing, the creepy eyes. Enhanced empathic reception. They read micro-expressions, pheromones, thermal patterns, all processed simultaneously. Their pupils adjust independently to track multiple data streams. Not hypnosis, just really good emotional intelligence mixed with predator biology. Pavel chewed thoughtfully. You're going to help her, aren't you, the Serythian woman? Kai closed the hollow display, meeting his friend's concerned gaze. Everyone she's asked has refused, Pavel. 17 people saw someone in need and turned away because of stories and fear. Maybe those 17 people had good survival instincts. Maybe they missed the chance to actually matter to someone. Pavel snorted, but his expression softened. You always were too idealistic for your own good. Just be careful, yeah. Universe doesn't reward noble gestures as often as the stories suggest. Kai's comm chirped before he could respond. A direct message, sender ID marked as Deck 7, Residential Unit 7C. His pulse jumped. The message was brief. Second meeting requested. Observation lounge, current time if convenient. That her? Pavel asked, reading Kai's expression. Yeah, Kai stood, already moving toward the exit. Yeah, it is. The observation lounge during night cycle was Kai's favorite place on the station. A bubble of transparent aluminum extending from the hull, offering an unobstructed view of space. Usually empty at this hour, it provided the illusion of floating among the stars. Lyss stood at the viewport, her reflection ghostly against the cosmic backdrop. She turned as he entered, and Kai noticed she looked tired. Did Serythians get tired? Apparently yes. You came quickly, she said. You said if convenient, this seemed convenient. He joined her at the viewport, keeping a respectful distance. Plus, I've been learning about hemophages. Fascinating stuff. Really poor branding, though. You should fire whoever named those. That almost laugh again. Our language has no translation for the concept. Hemophage was the best human xenobiologists could approximate. See, this is exactly the kind of detail 17 other people missed out on. Kai turned to face her directly. I've been thinking about your offer. Actually, I've been obsessively researching and overthinking it, which is kind of my process. And your conclusion? I have questions first. Why the fringe colony specifically? Why do you need a human guide? And this feels important. What happens when we get there? Lyss was quiet for a long moment, her gaze returning to the stars. My people have an enclave there, hidden, protected. After our homeworld was destroyed, survivors scattered across the galaxy. Most died alone, feared everywhere they went. Some found each other, built something new in the spaces between claimed territories. You're trying to get home. I am trying to reach the only place that might be home. Her voice carried centuries of exhaustion. Human stations dominate the transit routes. Without someone who understands your bureaucracies, your prejudices, your social structures, I will be detained at every checkpoint. Questioned, delayed, possibly imprisoned. Kai processed this, watching her reflection in the viewport. You're not just hiring a guide. You need someone who will vouch for you, someone human to make the humans comfortable. Yes, that's depressing on multiple levels. Yes, she agreed again, and there was dark humor in it. Kai took a breath, feeling the weight of the decision crystallize. Okay, here's the thing, I'm scared. You're reading my elevated heart rate right now, probably my stress pheromones, definitely my terrible attempt at appearing calm. But I'm also tired of being invisible, of fixing air regulators and going home to an empty quarters and pretending that's enough of a life. He met her eyes, those impossible dark eyes that saw too much. You asked why I'm not running. Truth is, fear feels less important than the possibility of actually mattering to someone. Even if that someone is a supposedly terrifying alien vampire woman who 17 smarter people avoided. Lyss turned fully toward him and something shifted in her expression, vulnerability breaking through ancient caution. You matter already, Kai Mercer. You chose to see a person where others saw only a monster. That choice has weight. So we're doing this, you're choosing me. I am choosing you, Lyss confirmed, and the formality in her tone suggested it meant more than simple agreement. Not as hired assistants, as companion, as someone trusted. Kai extended his hand, very human, very traditional. Then let's get you home. She looked at his hand for a heartbeat, then clasped it with her own. Her skin was cooler than his, her grip precise and careful, and Kai felt the tremor that ran through her. Relief, perhaps, or hope, or simply the acknowledgement that loneliness, however vast, could finally begin to end. Station security arrived at Kai's quarters on the 5th day of their partnership, which he supposed was longer than he'd expected them to wait. 2 officers, both human, both wearing expressions that suggested this wasn't their first problematic alien situation. Kai Mercer, we need to discuss your recent associations, the taller one said, not bothering with pleasantries. Kai leaned against his doorframe, arms crossed. You mean my job? I'm an environmental technician. I associate with malfunctioning air filters mostly. You've been seen with the Serythian multiple times. in non-professional contexts. Her name is Lyss, and last I checked, having conversations wasn't illegal on Station Epsilon. The shorter officer stepped forward. We're concerned for your safety. Serythians are dangerous. Their dietary requirements alone are well-documented scientific necessity, not predatory behavior, Kai interrupted. I've read the actual xenobiology reports, not just the scary campfire stories. Have you? They hadn't, clearly. The bureaucratic dance continued for another 20 minutes before Kai finally shut the door on them, his hands shaking slightly. Not from fear, from anger that surprised him with its intensity. When had he started caring enough to get angry? The transit authorization proved even more complicated. Kai spent 2 days navigating permit systems, arguing with officials who seemed personally offended by the concept of a Serythian passenger. He deployed every technical regulation he knew cited precedents, and in one memorable instance, threatened to file a formal discrimination complaint with the Galactic Commerce Council. Pavel watched this transformation with bemused concern. You know you're using words like precedent and formal complaint, right? Since when? Since bureaucracy became the obstacle between someone I care about and safety, Kai replied, not looking up from his datapad. You care about her. Is that really so surprising? Pavel considered this. Actually, no, you always did have a thing for lost causes. Remember that rescue cat from Earth that turned out to be a Felisian ambassador's pet? That was one time, and in my defense, it was very lost. In the evenings, Lyss taught him about Serythian culture in her quarters, which were sparse and temporary but slowly becoming more lived in. She spoke of poetry that required 3 voices to recite properly, of philosophical debates that lasted generations, of a people who valued memory above all else, because so few of them remained to remember. We had a saying, she told him one night, her long fingers tracing patterns in the air. Roughly translated, in choosing we become chosen. The act of selection is reciprocal, mutual. I like that, Kai said. Very non-linear causality, very science fiction. She smiled, that sharp, genuine expression he'd learned to cherish. You reduce tension with humor when you're uncomfortable with emotion. Guilty. It's my primary defense mechanism, right after sarcasm and inappropriate workplace commentary. It works, Lyss said softly. It makes you feel safe. The crisis came on the 8th day. Kai arrived at her quarters to find her collapsed against the wall, her skin carrying an ashen undertone that screamed wrongness. Her breathing was shallow, her pupils contracting and expanding erratically. Lyss. He dropped beside her, medical training from basic station certification flooding back. What happened? Insufficient supplementation, she managed. The station's medical supplies don't stock. I didn't want to impose. Are you kidding me right now? Kai's fear transformed instantly into action. He pulled up his sleeve. What do you need? Blood, take it. Kai, no, not asking, telling. What's the procedure? Her resistance crumbled under necessity and his stubborn insistence. She guided him through it with clinical precision. A small dermal injector, barely more invasive than a standard medical scan, drawing exactly what her symbiotes required. Not the horrific feeding from vampire mythology, but something strangely intimate in its trust and vulnerability. Afterward, she sat with her back against the wall, color returning to her features, and Kai watched emotions cycle across her face too quickly to name. When she finally spoke, her voice carried harmonics he'd never heard before, layered, complex, overwhelming. The gratitude I feel has no human equivalent. Your species doesn't experience emotional resonance at this depth. Try me anyway. You saw me weakened, vulnerable, and your instinct was care rather than exploitation. You offered sustenance freely. In Serythian culture, this creates bonds that transcend simple friendship. Kai settled beside her, shoulder almost touching hers. Good thing I'm not interested in simple friendship then. 3 days later, they stood at the departure dock, boarding passes cleared after Kai's relentless bureaucratic assault. The transport to the fringe would leave in 20 minutes. Station Epsilon sprawled behind them through the viewport, massive and indifferent and no longer feeling like home. Lyss carried a single travel case, everything she owned in one container. Kai had 2 bags and a profound sense of unreality about the entire situation. "Last chance to reconsider," Lyss said, watching him with those impossible eyes. "The fringe colonies are dangerous, lawless, nothing like station life." "I've spent 6 years being safe and invisible," Kai replied. "I'm ready for dangerous and visible. Besides, someone needs to keep you from collapsing dramatically in corridors. That happened once. Once is enough for a lifetime of concerned nagging." She laughed, and her hand found his. Cool skin against warm, different biologies touching with perfect certainty. Through the viewport, stars waited like promises in the dark, and Kai Mercer, formerly invisible environmental technician 3rd class, felt the weight of being chosen and choosing in return. The transport's boarding announcement echoed through the dock. They moved toward it together, 2 beings defying prejudice and fear and the vast lonely distances of space, proving that connection could exist anywhere, even in the darkness, even between worlds, even when everyone said to stay away. Kai had ignored them. She had chosen him, and in that reciprocal selection,